Recently, Microsoft is buying video game studios left and right, but also Sony are buying a few. So what about Nintendo? The last one they bought was Next Level Games in 2021, the developers that took over the Luigi's Mansion series and have made the Mario Smash football games, but also the Wii version of Punch-Out! In 2002, they bought Redwood Studios, and that studio doesn't need much explaining, right? But the one I want to talk about today is Monolith Soft, purchased by Nintendo in 2007. Monolith Soft is the studio that is mostly known for their Xenoblade games nowadays, but how did they get started? They were founded in 1999 by Tetsuya Takahashi, Hirohide Sugiura, and Yasuyuki One. Why? Because Takahashi and Sugiura were both working for Square and got a bit unsatisfied because they thought Square blocked their creative freedom and mostly put Final Fantasy into the front and center of the company, caring less about the other games. During his time at Square, Takahashi also met and later married Kaori Tanaka, mostly known as Soraya Saga, which is her pen name. Both of them worked on games like Final Fantasy V and VI, and later on proposed an idea and script for the next Final Fantasy VII. It was seemed as too dark and complicated, but Square allowed them to create it as their own game, which later became Xenogears. For me, Xenogears has one of the best stories in video games, maybe even the best. In a way, it was a blessing because they were allowed to do things a Final Fantasy story wasn't allowed to be back in the day. But the budget they got was also smaller, which makes sense from a business viewpoint. You would rather want to fuel Final Fantasy VII with all the money than an unproven franchise. They also got a bit too ambitious and couldn't quite finish the game in the 2-year deadline they got, which was already extended a bit. According to an interview in 2018 with then Famicom Gamer, Takahashi said, "It was like punching my way through. I think I felt a sense of I would never give up at the time. During the time at Squaresoft, there was a 1.5 year cap on development. We begged them to extend it to 2 years for Xenogears. Even with the extension, we weren't able to meet the deadline, and I was to just cut it off somewhere." But instead of wanting to end the game with a cliffhanger and hoping they were allowed to make a sequel one day, they struck a deal with Square to be allowed to finish it in a rather special way with their current budget and staff. Everyone who has played Xenogears knows how different the second disc of the game is. It almost turns into a visual novel, and many big set pieces are just talked about instead of letting you play them. There's even like memes about in games like Hi-Fi Rush recently that referred to the second disc of Xenogears. There's still gameplay and stuff to do, and sometimes I do think the complaints are a bit overblown, but just a bit, but I do understand them. So in short, the development on it was hell. A new staff team with not that much experience trying to make a 3D game when 3D was still fairly new, and a story that wanted to do too much in the end on a tight deadline and a budget that was not enough in the end. So, now owning their own company, they could create the games they want, right? But well, without money, you can't do that. They asked a couple of companies, but they all turned them down till Namco got interested and took them in, handling the logistics and marketing side so that the studio would mostly only have to focus on the development of their games. The first game was Xenosaga Episode 1, Der Wille zur Macht, and there were supposed to be 5 more, but it got cut short because Takahashi stepped down as the director of the second game, Xenosaga Episode 2, Jenseits von Gut und Böse, to allow the new generation of talent to foster. So they took the overdraft of the script that Takahashi and Soraya wrote, and a new writer, Norihiko Yonesaka, turned it into a full script. Changes were made, and they decided to rearrange the planned 6 games into a trilogy instead, also watching how well the series does in terms of sales, to maybe then continue making more if the demand is there. But Xenosaga 2 sold not so well, and it's not also a fan favorite. And they decided to create Xenosaga 3, Also sprach Zarathustra. I hope I didn't mispronounce it. I even read the book, Nietzsche, you were kinda cool, but I can't pronounce that hacking name, as the last one. Once again, cutting the dream of Takahashi's 2 visions short, since Xenogears was also intended to be episode 5 of a 6-part series, with the other parts never becoming a reality, not just with video games but also anime, movies, books, etc. During their time at Namco, they also created other games, such as the Barton Kaitos series, Namco x Capcom, and a Xenosaga spin-off called Xenosaga Freaks, but also porting Xenosaga 1 and 2 to the DS, with some changes to the story and other things, sadly for Japan only, and it's probably unlikely it will ever get translated. I also have a job for you. This summer, when the Barton Kaitos 1+2 remasters come out, you will buy them, okay? If you don't, then the monsters under your bed will catch you, because if you do buy it, there's hope we will finally get the third one, which was cancelled back in the day. But again, just like with Square, the people in charge felt they got less creative freedom than wanted, especially after the old head of Namco retired and the new people in charge somewhat soured the relationship with Monolith Soft. They broke away from Namco, who were already Bandai Namco at that point, and started working with Nintendo, who bought the majority of shares of Monolith Soft in April of 2007. Bandai Namco retained some of these shares till 2012, when they sold them to Nintendo and they truly became a part of them. And for what price? A measly 75 million yen. Sounds a lot, right? But at the time it was only around $620,615. A real deal, like $500,000, that's almost nothing for a company. And it turned out to be one of the best buys Nintendo has ever done. And again, most people know them for the Xenoblade games, but the first few games now owned by Nintendo weren't Xenoblade related at all. Bringer was an action RPG that sadly never got to Europe or America and was Japan exclusive. Nowadays there's a translation for it and it's worth checking out. It's an okay game. Then we got the Super Robot Tyson games that I can't really say much about since I never played them, but some of the characters also appear in the Project X Zone games that are crossover games between many franchises. It's a bit like Fire Emblem, but with characters from Resident Evil, Xenogames, Darkstalkers, Devil May Cry, Tekken, Dot Hack and so many more. And you actually also get Chrom and Lucina from Fire Emblem. It just fits. They're fun games if you like strategy, RPGs and love fun crossovers, and it's worth it just to see how some of the characters interact with each other. I really want a new one, but getting all the licenses and that kind of stuff must be a nightmare. And before we come to the games most people know that they also made a Dragon Ball Z game. I'm gonna say Z, not Z because I'm German. Dragon Ball Z, Attack of the Saiyans. Hopefully I didn't mispronounce Saiyans because when I was a kid I watched it in German obviously and it's written Saiyajin instead. But anyways, the game is supposedly a really good RPG, which is also on my list of games to play one day. But let's go to 2008 where Monolith Soft released their first and only non-RPG game. Disaster Day of Crisis, a game where a man named Raymond Bryce saves America from terrorists while a ton of natural disasters are happening. It's a mix between a light gun kind of game, mixed with parts where you walk around and save people and treat them. I played it back in the day but never beaten it, and recently I actually played it again and have beaten it, and it's an alright game. It's like a playable Michael Bay movie on the Wii, but one man gatekept a whole continent from enjoying a game they most likely would have enjoyed, since it's basically the American dream to save America. That man's name? Reggie. Nintendo of Europe actually localized the game, and to be fair it was kinda a flop, but I think it could have sold decently well over there. But Reggie said in an interview that the voice acting is laughable and that he doesn't believe that Disaster deserves a $50 price tag, basically slamming his own company's game, which must suck. This is coming from the same man who happily promoted Miyamoto's Wii Music, a game nobody can defend, and that also costed $50. And when it comes to Monolith Soft, Reggie made another mistake, not wanting to also bring over Xenoblade Chronicles 1, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Instead of Nintendo of America doing the dubbing and everything, it was Nintendo of Europe, and they did a pretty good job. One of the few Western dubs I could stomach, till I learned that Metal Face's voice actor in Japanese is Hacking Norio Wakamoto, and Melia's father is Yuji Nakata, two of the most legendary old man voices in the Japanese voice acting industry. I just had to switch over. Also, it wasn't even supposed to be called Xeno anything. It was named Monado, Beginning of the World, but in a Nintendo financial briefing in 2010, Iwata explained, at E3 2009, it was announced with a temporary name, Monado, Beginning of the World. We decided to call it Xenoblade to honor Mr. Tetsuya Takahashi, who poured his soul into making this and who has been working on the Xeno series. In another Iwata Ask about Xenoblade, Takahashi also said they ran into some problems during development and were afraid they couldn't put everything they wanted into the game again. But unlike Square back in the day, Nintendo just told them to take their time and finish what they started, even if they may have to delay it. Iwata was a true Ehrenmann, a German word for a man of honor, a respectable person. Or respectable? I miss Iwata sometimes. Eventually, through the campaign called Operation Rainfall, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 managed to also get released in America, but only at GameStop, which made it hard to find and rare, and so it did not sell that much over there. It may have not been the biggest commercial success, but it showed people that JRPGs are not fully dead yet, around a time when many people believed so. The jump to HD consoles hit Japanese developers hard, especially ones who wanted to make huge JRPGs, creating so many HD assets for big towns etc. that they were not prepared for. Which was also a huge problem for Monolith Soft's next game, Xenoblade X, because it was Monolith's first HD game and a massive one at that. And then the other problem was the Wii U. You couldn't even hope for any kind of big success on that console. The game released, and to me it's the greatest open world created so far. Not the best open world game, but the best open world. Important difference. Emulating it nowadays is extremely easy, but obviously people will think that the second they start the game on the emulator, it will get announced on the Switch instead, and I wish that would actually happen. This, by the way, also goes for all the Xenosaga and Xenogears games. None of those games can be bought on modern consoles, and it's a shame. And even used copies of those games are way too expensive, so don't fall for those prices. Don't feel bad about emulating them. So a few years go by, and it's the big day of the Nintendo Switch presentation, and there we saw the first scenes of Xenoblade 2, the next own project. Their own project? Yeah, because at that point we already knew a big chunk of people from Monolith Soft were helping out on Breath of the Wild 2, and on that point they also helped on other games too already. Even if you never played the Xenoblade game, you most likely play the games they helped working on. They got their main studio that does the Xenoblade games, but also games they helped on where things like Super Smash Bros. Brawl, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, and Breath of the Wild, and soon to be Tears of the Kingdom 2. I don't even want to imagine how Breath of the Wild would look if Monolith Soft didn't help them with it. It was Nintendo's real first open world game, and without the assistance of Monolith Soft's main developers of games like Xenoblade X, it probably would have looked a little bit different, and the open world would have not been as great as it became nowadays. I think. Obviously, we never know, but I do think without them, it would have been very different. And also having a studio in Kyoto that helped out with the following games: Animal Crossing New Leaf, Pikmin 3, A Link Between Worlds, Splatoon, Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer, Splatoon 2, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and also Splatoon 3. That's quite the list, and they are not just a great asset to have for their own games, but also to help out on the other popular Nintendo franchises. But anyways, people who know me know Xenoblade 2 is my favorite game of all time. It was also Monolith Soft's first actual commercial hit. While the other games didn't exactly flop, they did not actually move the needle that much either. To this day, it has sold around 2,440,000 copies. It sold already well enough in its first few months, but it just kept going, mostly thanks to the ongoing support the game got with nice updates and the expansion. What I really also loved was Bandai Namco allowing Monolith Soft to use Cosmos and Telos in Xenoblade 2, two important characters from the Xenosaga series. Could have been nice if Square Enix also allowed a Xenogears cameo too. Or maybe they never got asked, we will never know. After that we got the HD version of the first Xenoblade, and now we also recently got Xenoblade 3, which is also getting its own big expansion soon. So they finally hit their stride, and it makes me happy that Monolith Soft, but also especially Tetsuya Takahashi, finally found a place where they feel happy to work for, and I hope he can fulfill his true vision of video games and don't get it cut short again. And all of that for just a measly $627,615. In terms of money for a big company, that's like nothing at all. I wish I had that much though. Not sure what I would buy with it, but maybe the Pyro and Mythra and Nia figurines finally. And that's it with the video. I hope you enjoyed it. In a way, I just kind of wanted to highlight Monolith Soft and how much work they put in for Nintendo. But maybe I can also make some people interested in trying the older games that are worth it. And don't forget, buy the Barton Kaitos remasters if you enjoy JRPGs. And maybe with that we can also show Namco that the Xenosaga games are also worth remastering. Like always, you can leave a like if you want to, or also a subscription, and have yourself a good one. A nice evening, morning, night, whatever fits you.